Hi everyone, this is Farah and this is Leading by Design, conversations about design and leadership. In our last episode, we reviewed a good book on the topic of behavioral economy. We are going to continue our conversation on the topic today. I'm so pleased to introduce our guest. I have amazing Angela Bliss with me. She is a behavioral scientist and I have the pleasure of knowing her and working with her at NAB. Welcome, Ange. Thanks for being here with us today. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Farah. It's great to be here. It's lovely working with you, and I'm glad we've reconnected over this.
Fantastic. Thank you. Let's start by telling us a bit about yourself.
Sure. So I started life as an economist. So I worked early in my career off the back of a business degree in economics and marketing and some Japanese. I've got a master's in the art and archaeology of Asia when I was determined to become unemployable, which I did become unemployable. And then I got into digital a long time ago. So I've been working in and around digital design for about 20 years now,
Wow.
but always had an interest in economics. And that led into my interest in behavioral science.
Yeah, I can see how they are all related and linked together. Yeah, it's really good to have knowledge in different fields. You can pull from all of them and bring them all
Yeah.
together, connect them, and that's where magic happens. All right, I'm curious to know, how did you, oh, before we jump into that, how did you get into the behavioral science? You said it was a gradual thing, but how come like exactly behavioral science?
Sure. Well, look, working around UX and CX, I was always fascinated by why people made certain decisions, why they clicked on a button, why they downloaded an app, why they said they were going to do something and never did.
Hmm.
And that curiosity really led me into reading books. So books on behavioral economic theory and behavioral scientists. And then that was probably around about 10 years ago. And then I started just to apply the theories myself. And then decided that actually I wanted some formal education. So I did a master's in behavioral science at the London School of Economics.
No.
And I've been looking at the intersection of behavioral science and design, innovation, marketing strategy for the last 5 years.
Oh wow, great. I love to talk about all of them with you, but I'm sure we don't have time today. We will focus more on behavioral science part. Um, Pretty impressive, and thanks for that. Do you remember the first book you read on behavioral science? Which one was it?
I think it was Nudge.
Ah,
Nudge.
that's a great one,
Yeah,
isn't it? I read that one.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. So, and
Um,
that's the one I recommend. I recommend those books. Yeah.
Yeah, I read Nudge and I read Predictably Irrational. What fascinates me most about behavioral science is how people make decisions, and sometimes it's unconscious. You don't realize you're making that decision the way you do. What fascinates you the most
Yeah.
about this field?
I think 95% of our decisions are made unconsciously. So in system one thinking, which means that we need a new tool that allows us to understand the driver's motivations, biases that affect the 95% of decisions that we make unconsciously. So in traditional
95%. Wow.
5% only, approximately, of our decisions are made in system two thinking, which is that measured, considered, controlled thinking. All the other decisions we make, and we make about 36,000 decisions a day, are
Wow.
made in system one thinking. So that's fast, irrational, associative, autopilot decisions. And that's how we get through the day. Our brains would explode otherwise. So I was really looking for a toolkit that would help me as a designer and a strategist to understand on a much deeper level
Mhm.
behavior, and then to be able to design more effectively.
Mhm. Yeah, cool. Oh, I was going to ask you how many percentage of our decisions are being made unconsciously. I had it roughly guess about 70-80%. Didn't think it's going to be 95. Wow. All right.
Yeah.
Cool. I have been hearing the term behavioral science and behavioral economy. I
Yeah.
would like to know what's the difference between the two. I did some Googling. I'm not sure if I quite understand it.
That's a really great question. I get asked that a lot.
Mhm.
So behavioral economics is a subfield of behavioral science. So behavioral science is like the umbrella discipline, and it combines insights from psychology, from cognitive sciences, from neuroscience, and economics.
Okay.
It draws on behavioral economic theories to inform the frameworks and the models that we use to understand consumer behavior. So behavioral economics really is about understanding how people make decisions and where those decisions deviate
Mhm.
from classical economic kind of predictions.
Okay, so it's more focused on economy side of the stuff.
It's the
Whereas,
theory frameworks. It's the
yeah,
theory. And then science takes those theories and it runs experiments
okay.
um, to understand a particular context. And they provide the models and the frameworks that we need, that we use when we're analyzing a kind of behavioral context. Behavioral science, so I trained as, you get a master's of science when you do behavioral science. So you're utilizing the same experimental frameworks like random controlled trials, for example, and you study econometrics and you study statistics, advanced statistics, and statistical modeling. So you operate like a scientist. The tools that you use are the tools from behavioral economics.
Okay, interesting. It sounds a bit complex though. Is there any other sub-branch under behavioral science apart from behavioral economy?
Well, so there would be psychology,
Okay,
neuroscience,
yeah.
cognitive sciences,
Hmm.
and and economics. So
Oh,
economic theory is obviously, how people make trade-offs, how people make choices. So they're all the sub-disciplines and subfields that sit under that broader behavioral science banner. It's a bit complicated, but behavioral science is a multidisciplinary field. It's not just one subject area.
yeah. Do you think you mentioned a couple of different fields that comes underneath? Is there one that is more prominent, or is used more or at least in the day-to-day job that you do?
Not really. I mean, I don't use a lot of kind of neuroscience experimentation because I don't have access to brain, scans and technologies. But I certainly would use psychology a lot. I use all the tools of a data scientist, and I use all the behavioral economic and more behavioral economic theories.
Interesting, you mentioned data science. I'm looking into that more, and we are going to have a book review on that one in our one
Great
of
idea.
future episodes. Yes. I took your advice in last conversation, and yeah, I'm digging into it more. I'd like to know how Australia compares with other parts of the world in terms of behavioral science. I know you studied in London, and you know how it is in some other parts of the world. How do you assess Australia in this field?
Look, it's an emerging discipline. There are some pockets of real excellence happening. So government, so both the federal government and the state government, like the Department of Premiers and Cabinet in Victoria, I believe, has behavioural scientists. There's the in the federal government, there's also a team of behavioural economists. And then within industry, the banks are starting to build behavioural science teams. The insurers are. There's a couple working in health. But until recently, you couldn't study, if I'm correct, a postgrad or a graduate. So you had to go overseas. So that's why there's not a lot of us kicking around, but there will be. So I know UTS has got a really interesting degree that they've spun off up a couple of years ago in behavioural economics. So it's an emerging discipline, but we are way behind the UK and the US. So in the UK and the US, it would be very, very common to have behavioural scientists working alongside product designers, service designers, working in marketing firms, working in advertising agencies, working in all the big tech firms. But we just haven't had that exposure because there just hasn't been a lot of behavioural scientists around. I don't know anyone really working at the interface that I do. There would be a couple, no doubt, that work with a kind of a long history of design experience and behavioural scientists. So yeah, we're kind of a rare but emerging breed.
I'm for one very interested, and I'm going to get into more about how people can get into it in Australia, what courses, classes, books they can read. But before that, you mentioned a lot of industries that are currently using behavioral science today in Australia. How is it being used? How behavioral science is being used in financial industry and non-financial industry? How do you compare the two?
That's a great question too. So in finance, it's being used to improve savings. It's being used to reduce debt levels, and to guide people towards better financial choices. So it's quite well established within the financial industry, both in Australia and overseas. Banks use it, in notifications, in app design, in messaging, etc. In non-financial sectors, very common overseas, less so here, but there's growing interest within health. And I've also done quite a bit of work in health, and, improving patient outcomes, improving, the take-up of medications, etc. And then less so, but emerging in retail. So a lot of the big retailers are starting to employ behavioural scientists. And then you've got employee experience, workplace safety. Those type of fields are also starting to employ behavioural science.
Great. So, based on my reading, an important part of behavioral science is to understand how people make decisions, and that's what you touched on as well. As a designer, knowing this means that we can frame our products, services, or package them in a way to guide people to make decision and impact their decision making process. It's a real power, and I understand that it can be misused sometimes. We've talked about ethical design in the past in our previous episodes. I would like to know, what do you think designers can do not to misuse that power to keep things ethical?
Super important topic. I always sense check what I'm doing with two key questions. So, am I helping the customer make the best choice for them?
Mhm.
And am I helping them to achieve what they want to do?
Mhm.
And if I get a tick on both of those boxes, then that means that I'm guiding their
Mhm.
decision. I'm not manipulating it.
I
So that's
like.
my recommendation as two kind of key questions. I
Mm.
also really like ethical design checklists, red hat team reviews, and also always considering the long-term effects, not just the short-term effects
Mm.
of your designs.
Yeah.
Um, And one thing also, that all good behavioral scientists get trained in is to look for unintended consequences. So
Oh,
what are those things that wouldn't, that don't come to mind instinctively?
yeah.
But research, go online, find similar maybe design challenges, see if there were any unintended consequences that you need to account for in the design process
Mhm.
before you go into ship something out to your
Yeah.
customers.
Yeah, that's definitely important part of ethical design. And it's very hard, it's a hard one, isn't it, to predict how it can be misused or,
Yeah.
misguide people. Um, yeah.
Yes.
Is there any
And that's where testing comes in, you
Ah,
know.
that was my question. I guess that was the answer.
Yeah.
But
Look,
yeah.
you can't predict. So running kind of, tighter pilots, for example, would be a good way of testing things that you just can't predict in a kind of controlled environment, like within a design studio or within a lab. It's not until you get, your artifacts or whatever you're designing in front of people that you can really test for unintended consequences. And then when you go to pilot, again, do it with a discrete population, a segment rather than the whole population. So again, if there's any unattended or, positive consequences, they're not always, unintended consequences are not always negative, then at least you can kind of understand and adapt your process or, go market plan accordingly.
Yeah, I was going to you're reading my mind. I was going to ask you what sort of testing you do, because usually the ones I like, the sort of testing I do is usability testing or different sorts of
Yeah.
concept testing and A/B testing or surveys. But I guess pilot
Yes.
is a great way that you mentioned, that way you can reach to the bigger population of people and get into details and have more data.
Yeah.
Is there any other way that you would, any other sort of testing? Yes, I can
Yeah,
see
sure.
that.
So I'm always looking for observed behaviors,
Mm.
not reported behaviors.
Okay.
So I'm very skeptical about what, they're not, customers aren't lying, but we just do not understand
Mhm.
um, the reasons or the motivations behind our decisions, because 95% of them, again, are made unconsciously. So I'm looking for data that responds to how people have actually behaved. And that could be A/B testing. We rely a lot on, testing of different versions and seeing what moved the dial, behavioral transactional data, and then making kind of, decisions off the back of actual, real observed behavior, not what someone is telling you.
Mhm.
It's what they're actually doing that I'm interested
Okay.
in.
Great, thank you. Thanks for that. If someone would like to dive into behavioral economy field, what sources or pathway do you recommend for them?
Yeah, sure. So, classic books, Thinking Fast and Slow.
Mhm.
We talked about nudge. We talked about predictably irrational. Then there's online courses. Coursera, I'm sure, has got a couple of really good courses. And then podcasts.
Mhm.
So there's Choiceology,
Mhm.
and then there's Behavioural Grooves. Yeah, they were two that came to mind.
Was also going to ask you about GABS, Global Association of Applied Behavioral Scientists. Is that something that we can have access to in Australia?
We do have access to GABs in Australia. You do have to qualify to be an accredited member. So it's the Global Association of Applied Behavioural Science.
Mhm.
It's an accreditation body that brings together practitioners who are actually applying behavioural science in the wild, so to speak, so in real life and in real world contexts.
Mhm.
So the focus is less on kind of laboratories, controlled experiments, and academia, and more about how behavioural science is being applied across industries and sectors, etc. Yeah.
Okay.
So you've either got to do a behavioural science master's in selected institutions and be working in the field.
All right, a little bit of a change in the subject. In general, in your opinion, what skills designers should focus on to become successful in corporate environment, especially?
That is another fab question. I would say let's park the crafted design to one side, and focus on what else, really establishes your credibility in the workplace. And I would say the ability to be a great storyteller, the ability to manage stakeholders really effectively.
Yeah.
I think system thinking abilities are underrated and are really, really important, especially for the service designers out there. The ability to take research and drive action. I mean, it sounds very cliched, but I still think that is a really important quality. I would also say the depth of understanding you have around the business model, the operation model, the key revenue drivers of the business unit you're working in. If we want a seat at the table, we need to understand how the business fundamentally works, to be able to have really quality discussions with our stakeholders. And I always said that for me, the kind of ideal designer would have some consultancy background and an MBA.
Yeah.
That to me would be an ideal person to work with, because it's all about influence. And you can't be scared of numbers and across those topics as you are, human-centered design concepts and theories.
Yeah, it's our job. It sound easy, but it's lots of skills are involved to be successful, isn't it?
I
And sometimes softer
completely
skills
agree.
like managing people, it's the most important.
Always softer skills matter. Yeah, your communication skills will trump your technical skills every day.
That's right. That's right. Great. We are getting closer to the end of our episode. I enjoyed the chat with you thoroughly, and there was lots of questions coming to my mind as you were talking, but I will find another time to chat to you
Part
about
two.
those. Just to close off with one question, I try to find successful, powerful women like yourself around me, and I'm lucky to work at NAB and have a lot of people like yourself to reach out to and talk to them. I always ask this question, what is specific skill for women, particularly? Do you recommend to get them to be more successful in design field?
I think two key things for me are self-advocacy and boundary setting, actually. I think we make really good mentors. We're really good collaborators, but we also often don't claim credit for ourselves, or negotiate or advocate for ourselves within those power structures when something doesn't align with our values. And then finally, build your tribe like you're doing, Farah, through this fabulous podcast. There's nothing better than supportive women around you. And, I would sign off by saying build a tribe of really women who want the best for you, because they're out there.
And to be honest, I've been very lucky, and I had a lot of great women who were my leaders, and they lifted me up and supported me a lot, and I wouldn't be where I am without their help. And I like to give that back to other people throughout this podcast, and that's why I have great people like yourself to talk to and learn from.
Oh, that's great, Farah. Feel the same way about you, and I think it's such an important cause.
Thank you so much, Ange. I really appreciate your
Pleasure.
time.
Saying thanks so much for having me.
Thank you.
We'll
Thank
speak
you.
soon. See you, darling.
Yeah. Bye.